My brother filed for guardianship of our elderly father. The lawyer asked one question that ended everything. My name is Audrey Sinclair, and I am 44 years old. 7 months ago, I sat in a courtroom on the 3rd floor of the Harmon County Courthouse and watched my brother Marcus present himself to a judge as the devoted son who had no choice but to seek legal guardianship of our father because our father could no longer make safe decisions for himself. Marcus had prepared for this hearing. He had an attorney, a carefully worded petition, and a stack of medical records he had obtained through our father's primary care physician. Records he had requested without telling our father, without telling me, and without telling the physician that our father had not consented to the release. He had also prepared a narrative. In this narrative, Marcus was the concerned son who had watched his sister fail to properly manage their father's care, while their father's health and finances deteriorated. He had witnesses. He had documentation of my father's confusion during a difficult medical episode 8 months earlier. He had a plan for our father's living arrangements, financial management, and medical decision-making that was thorough, detailed, and presented with the particular confidence of a man who had rehearsed it multiple times. What Marcus had not prepared for was the question his own attorney's filing had prompted the judge to ask. A single, procedural question. The kind that gets asked in every guardianship hearing as a matter of course, that nobody in that courtroom had thought to prepare an answer for. Nobody, except me. Before I go further, please like and subscribe if you are new here. Drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is. I read every one. Now let me take you back 4 years, to the winter my father's health first changed, and to the slow, quiet way I became the person Marcus's lawyer would later describe, in open court, as the primary caregiver, before realizing that description was the foundation of everything about to go wrong for his client. Chapter 1. What caregiving actually looks like. I will keep the background short because the hearing is where this story lives. My father, Raymond Sinclair, is 78 years old. He was a high school biology teacher for 31 years in Harmon County, the kind of man who kept a bird feeder outside his classroom window and remembered every student's name for decades after they graduated. He lives in the house where Marcus and I grew up, a 3-bedroom colonial on Sycamore Lane that he and my mother bought in 1979 and that my mother left to him when she died 11 years ago. 4 years ago, my father had a mild stroke. Not catastrophic. He recovered his speech and most of his mobility within 6 weeks, but sufficient to change things. He tired more easily. He sometimes lost track of conversations. He needed help with medication management, with driving to appointments, with the 100 small logistics of daily life that had previously been invisible because he had handled them without thinking. Marcus lives 40 minutes away. I live 8 minutes away. This geographic fact became, over the following 4 years, the entire shape of what happened. I want to be honest about what 4 years of primary caregiving actually looks like, because I think people who haven't done it sometimes imagine it as a series of dramatic moments rather than what it actually is. An accumulation of ordinary days that each require something. It looked like Tuesday evenings at my father's house going through his medication organizer and refilling it for the week. It looked like driving him to 37 medical appointments over 4 years, sitting in waiting rooms with a book, driving home again. It looked like calling his insurance company when a claim was denied and spending 45 minutes on hold and then another 20 minutes explaining the situation to 3 different representatives. It looked like fixing the leak under his kitchen sink on a Saturday morning because he had called me instead of a plumber because calling me felt less like admitting he needed help. It looked like being the person he called, not Marcus, me. Marcus visited on holidays. He called on Sundays, sometimes. He sent birthday cards with gift cards inside. He was not absent in the way that is cruel. He was absent in the way that is easy, the specific ease of a family member who lives far enough away that the daily logistics fall to someone else, and close enough that they can attend the important occasions and feel, genuinely, that they are involved. Chapter 2. The asset that started everything. Here is the part of this story that explains Marcus's motivation, because without it, the guardianship filing seems disproportionate to the situation. My father's house on Sycamore Lane is worth, in the current market, approximately $640,000. It has no mortgage. My father owns it outright. It is, by a significant margin, the largest asset in his estate. 2 years ago, a developer approached my father about purchasing the property. The developer was acquiring several adjacent lots for a mixed-use residential project and needed my father's parcel to make the footprint work. The initial offer was $580,000. The developer indicated flexibility. My father called me the same day the developer called him. He was uncertain, not confused, uncertain, which are different things and which I want to be careful to distinguish because the distinction matters legally and personally. He understood the offer. He understood what selling would mean. He simply wasn't sure what he wanted to do. I told him I would help him think through it. We spent 3 evenings over 2 weeks going through his options. Sell and move to a senior community he had visited and liked. Sell and move in with me. Decline and stay in the house with increased support. Accept a partial sale of the rear lot only. We made a list of what mattered most to him. We talked about what my mother would have thought, which is a thing my father finds useful when he has a decision to make. He decided not to sell. He called the developer himself and declined. Marcus found out about the developer's offer 3 weeks later, through a mutual family friend. He called me that evening and asked why I hadn't told him. I told him our father had handled it himself, and that it had been his decision to make. Marcus said he thought major decisions about the property should involve the whole family. I said I thought they should involve our father, who owned it. That was the beginning of what ended in the courtroom 7 months ago. Chapter 3. The Filing. The guardianship petition arrived, served to my father at his home, on a Thursday morning in February. My father called me within minutes of the process server leaving. His voice was not confused. It was hurt, the specific hurt of a man who has just been told, in legal language, by his own son, that he is no longer considered capable of managing his own life. I drove to his house immediately. I read the petition carefully. Then I called an attorney. The petition alleged that Raymond Sinclair demonstrated cognitive impairment sufficient to warrant court-appointed guardianship over his person and estate. It cited the medical episode from 8 months earlier, a period of significant confusion following a medication interaction that had been identified, treated, and resolved by his physician within 72 hours. It cited 2 instances in which my father had allegedly forgotten appointments, one a dentist appointment, one a lunch with Marcus that Marcus had not confirmed in writing, and that my father did not recall being scheduled. It cited a general pattern of declining decision-making capacity, evidenced by the developer situation, framing my father's decision not to sell as an example of poor financial judgment. The petition requested that Marcus be appointed legal guardian of both my father's person, meaning medical decisions, and his estate, meaning financial decisions, including the house. I read that last paragraph twice. Then I understood completely. Here's what I want to ask you because I think a lot of people will recognize this moment. Have you ever read a document that was technically about one thing and understood immediately that it was actually about something else entirely? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Chapter 4. What I had that Marcus didn't know about. My attorney, a woman named Gloria Reese who specialized in elder law and had the particular calm of someone who had seen every version of this situation, asked me in our first meeting to describe my involvement in my father's care over the previous 4 years. I described it. She listened carefully. Then she asked if I had any documentation. I did. Not because I had anticipated a legal dispute, because I am organized and because 4 years of managing someone else's medical care generates paperwork whether you keep it or not, and I had kept it. I had 37 appointment records, dates, providers, notes I had taken in the waiting rooms, follow-up instructions. I had 2 years of medication management logs I had kept in a simple notebook because my father's physician had asked me to track any changes he noticed in his daily functioning. I had email correspondence with his insurance company, his pharmacy, his 2 specialist physicians. I had a text message history with my father spanning 4 years, daily contact, logistical conversations, the ordinary texture of a caregiving relationship. I had a letter from his primary care physician, Dr. Miriam Cole, written 18 months earlier when I had asked for written guidance on managing his post-stroke medication protocol, that addressed me by name as his primary caregiver and thanked me for my attentiveness to his care. Gloria looked at the documentation for a long moment. Then she said, "He filed this without knowing any of this existed." That was correct. Marcus had never asked what I did during those 4 years. He had assumed, I think, that I was present but not particularly organized about it. He had assumed that the absence of visible documentation meant the absence of documentation. He was wrong. Chapter 5. The Hearing. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in April. My father attended, which he had every right to do, and which Marcus's attorney had apparently not anticipated, because the attorney's opening remarks had been prepared under the assumption that the subject of the guardianship petition would not be present to respond to characterizations of his own mental capacity. My father sat beside Gloria and me at the respondents' table. He was wearing the gray suit he had worn to my college graduation. He had his medication list in his breast pocket, printed on a card he kept there so he could show it to any physician who asked. He was, I want to say clearly, entirely present. Marcus sat at the petitioner's table with his attorney. He looked at our father once when he entered and then looked away. I noticed this. Marcus's attorney presented the petition's evidence first: the medical episode, the missed appointments, the developer situation, reframed as evidence of impaired financial judgment. Then Gloria stood. She submitted the documentation package I had assembled: 37 appointment records, 2 years of medication logs, the physician correspondence, the insurance email history, into evidence as exhibits. Marcus's attorney objected to several items on procedural grounds. The judge reviewed the objections and overruled most of them. Then the judge asked the question. It was not a dramatic question. It was, as I said, a procedural one, the kind asked in every guardianship hearing as a matter of course. The judge looked at Marcus's attorney and asked, simply, who had been serving as Raymond Sinclair's primary caregiver for the period described in the petition. Marcus's attorney answered, confidently, that the petitioner, Marcus, had been closely involved in his father's care and was best positioned to formalize that involvement through the guardianship arrangement. The judge looked at the exhibit list. He looked at the physician's letter, which was Exhibit C, which addressed me by name as Raymond Sinclair's primary caregiver. He looked at Marcus's attorney. He asked the question again, more specifically this time. Who had accompanied Raymond Sinclair to his medical appointments during the period in question? Marcus's attorney asked for a moment to confer with his client. The judge granted 30 seconds. Marcus, I watched from across the room, said something to his attorney in a voice too low to hear. His attorney's expression changed in the specific way that attorneys' expressions change when they have just learned something material that their client failed to mention. The attorney stood and said that he understood the respondent had documentation, suggesting significant caregiver involvement by the respondent's daughter. The judge said that was his understanding as well, based on the exhibits submitted, and asked whether the petitioner could clarify how the guardianship arrangement he was proposing would interact with the existing caregiver relationship, given that the proposed guardian and the existing caregiver were different people. Marcus's attorney had no prepared answer for this question. Chapter 6. What happened next? I want to describe the next 40 minutes carefully, because they did not unfold the way courtroom scenes unfold in movies, with speeches and dramatic revelations and a gavel coming down on a moment of obvious justice. They unfolded slowly, procedurally, the way legal proceedings actually unfold, with long pauses while the judge reviewed documents and short exchanges between attorneys and occasional clarifying questions that each quietly moved the ground further from where Marcus's petition had assumed it would be. Gloria asked to call my father as a witness. The judge allowed it. My father took the oath with the particular steadiness of a man who has spent his life taking things seriously. He stated his name and address and the year he had purchased his home. He described his daily routine: breakfast at 7, bird feeder refilled by 7:30, newspaper until 8:30, the rest of the morning variable. He described his medication schedule from memory, accurately, matching the card in his breast pocket. The judge asked him directly whether he wished to have a guardian appointed to manage his personal and financial decisions. My father said clearly and without hesitation that he did not. He said he had a physician he trusted, a daughter who helped him with logistics, and a mind that worked well enough to know when he needed help and to ask for it. He said that the developer had offered him money for his home, and he had thought about it carefully and decided he wanted to stay in the house where his wife's garden still grew in the backyard. He said he did not understand why his son believed he could not make that decision for himself. The courtroom was very quiet after that. Chapter 7. The ruling. The judge denied the guardianship petition. He did not do this dramatically. He did it in 3 sentences, read from a brief handwritten note he had made during the proceeding, citing insufficient evidence of cognitive impairment and the subject's clearly expressed wishes regarding his own care. He also noted, for the record, that the documented caregiver relationship between Raymond Sinclair and his daughter suggested that existing informal support structures were functioning appropriately, and that court-appointed guardianship was not indicated. Marcus left the courthouse without speaking to our father. He walked past me in the hallway without making eye contact. His attorney shook Gloria's hand with the particular professionalism of someone who has just lost a case cleanly and knows it. My father and I went to the diner on Main Street and ordered coffee and eggs and sat in a booth by the window for 2 hours. He told me about a bird he had seen at the feeder that morning that he hadn't been able to identify. I looked it up on my phone. Cedar waxwing, I told him. He said he thought so but hadn't been sure. We did not talk about Marcus much, not that day. Chapter 8. What came after? My father called Marcus 2 weeks after the hearing. I know this because my father told me. He called on a Sunday, which is when Marcus usually called him. He did not mention the courthouse. He asked about Marcus's children, about his job, about whether the renovation project Marcus had been working on in his backyard was finished. Marcus answered briefly, and the call ended in less than 10 minutes. My father told me about it simply, without editorializing. He said it had been a strange call. He said Marcus had sounded like someone who didn't know what to say. I told him that was probably accurate. My father nodded. Then he said something I have thought about many times since. He said that he had known for a while that Marcus wanted the house. Not in a way he had been able to name exactly until the petition, just a feeling, the way you develop feelings about people you have known for their entire lives. He said he had also known for a while that I did not want the house, that I came over on Tuesday evenings to do his medication organizer and drove him to his appointments because those were things that needed doing and I was the person nearby who could do them. Not because of the house. I told him he was right about that. He said, "I know," and looked out the window at the parking lot for a moment. That's why I kept the letter from Dr. Cole. I looked at him. He said he had asked Miriam Cole 2 years ago to put in writing that I was his primary caregiver. He had asked her specifically. He had filed the letter himself in his own paperwork, in the folder he kept in his desk drawer where he kept all his important documents. He had given me a copy without telling me why. I stared at him. He smiled. A small, entirely satisfied smile. "I've been a teacher for 31 years, he said. I know how to document things." Chapter 9. Where things stand. Marcus and my father have spoken 3 times since the hearing. The conversations are short. They are, as far as I know, working toward something that might eventually resemble a relationship, slowly, in the way that things damaged by a specific action sometimes slowly repair when the action is not repeated. Marcus and I have not spoken. I do not know if we will soon. I am not, I want to be honest about this, in a hurry. My father still lives on Sycamore Lane. The developer called again 3 months after the hearing with a revised offer. My father listened politely and said he had decided to stay in his house, possibly for the rest of his life, and that he appreciated the call. Then he called me to tell me about it, laughing slightly at the persistence. I refilled his medication organizer on Tuesday. Dr. Cole's nurse called to confirm his appointment next Thursday. The cedar waxwings, my father reported in a text last week, have been back every morning this week, and he has started leaving out the berries they prefer. The house on Sycamore Lane is still his. His garden is still in the backyard. His bird feeder is still outside the kitchen window where he can see it from his chair while he reads the newspaper every morning. And in the desk drawer where he keeps his important documents, the letter from Dr. Miriam Cole addressed to me is still there, filed by my father himself, 2 years before a hearing he somehow knew was coming, because a man who spent 31 years teaching biology to teenagers understands that the most important things are the ones you document before anyone tells you to. If someone in your life saw what was coming before you did and quietly prepared for it, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone who is quietly doing the work of caring for someone they love, without documentation, without recognition, without knowing yet that the record they're not keeping might someday be the most important thing they have. Start keeping it. Date everything. Let the ordinary days be their own evidence. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I'll see you in the next one.